All right, so I'm not sure if you guys could hear that intro music. I have a video here I wanted to share, and I did not hear that coming through on the intro. So I'm going to pull this up a different way. Give me just a minute. And got a quick intro here for you, and then we'll get into the event for today. All right.
Hey, happy Friday. Welcome back to another Appsmith Friday Tech Workshop. I'm Joseph, a senior developer advocate with Appsmith, and today will be our first Ask the A-Team workshop. So the Friday Tech Workshops, every Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern, we're going to have some type of content, but you'll have to wait and see what it is. One of them could be a Q&A or Ask the A-Team. Today we're going to do that and a mix of live coding to answer some of those questions. Another format we'll be doing is a community show and tell. So if you have something you've built that you'd like us to show the community, you can submit your template, your blog post, whatever it is, and we can demo that for you, or you can even come on the live stream and demo it yourself. And the last option would be testing new features. So last week and a couple of the other workshops, we've looked at custom widgets, and next week we could be testing a new feature. You'll have to wait and see, but it's going to be one of those formats. So today we're going to start out answering some questions from Discord. There's one in particular that came in over the weekend, and I really want to thank some community members that helped out there. But first, we have a quick announcement.
All
Hey,
right.
happy Friday. Welcome back to another Apps.
Give me just a second, guys. So I had a playlist set up here to kind of link these videos together, and that is not working for me. So I'm just going to have to do this manually and pull up the next video. 1 second. All right. All right, today we are announcing a new community leader program for both Discord and the community portal. So we know that there are a lot of people that are already out there volunteering their time, answering questions. We appreciate you, the community appreciates you, and we want to reward that type of behavior. There's a lot of people that do that just out of the kindness of their heart. They like to help other people, and we'd like to make it official. We want you to keep doing what you're doing, but to also give you something in return. So if you're one of those people, if you're interested in continuing to help out the community and getting something out of it in return, what we'd like to do is, one, we're going to send you some swag. Two, there's also going to be a private Discord channel set up just for our community leaders and the Appsmith team. So if there's a specific issue, if you need help on something, if you're not sure, you'll be able to get a direct line to us. We'll also be featuring our community leaders in the newsletter and on social. So if you're a freelancer, this is a great way to get your name out there. And really, if you just want to keep doing it to do it, we want to give you some type of perk. So even if you're not interested in the swag or the newsletter or whatnot, just let us know that you're interested in being a community leader, because there's some other permissions that come with that as well. So you'll be able to help us with the forums if there's posts that need to be deleted, but it's more than just being a mod. We want to elevate the good content as well. And if there's an issue, if there's like a bug that multiple people have had and we haven't caught it yet, you could be the one that raises that concern and gets it addressed faster. So we see people out there doing this kind of thing already, and we want to reward it. So if you're interested in that, you can apply. We're going to be taking maybe 2 or 3 at first. We will probably add more later, so the application is just going to stay open. You can apply anytime. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and check out today's event. We do have a question that came in over the weekend. We're going to start out with this one from... All right, guys, thanks for bearing with me here with the technical difficulties. I think I've got everything straightened out now. We're going to jump into the event. So really excited about this new community leader role. If you're interested in that, please reach out. Let us know, what you'd like to do if you're interested in helping out in the forums. We had some other roles that are going to be coming out soon as well. So keep an eye out for those. It's going to be more focused towards freelancers. But this first one is just a community leader for anybody that's helping out in the forum. So we really appreciate you guys. And with that out of the way, we are going to get into the questions for today. So these events, the Friday Tech Workshops, it could be any format. Today's going to be Q&A with a little bit of live coding to answer some of those questions. If you do have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat on YouTube. I'm going to try to keep an eye on those, but if I don't see it, we'll just answer those on the next one. So the ones I have today are some recent questions that came in on through Discord. We're going to go ahead and get started with these. So the first question is about prepared statements. We have a setting in Appsmith that will parse through your query body, and if there's certain text in there that could cause SQL injection, prepared statements helps avoid that so that the user can't abuse it and use SQL injection. There's an existing issue related to this, and then we're going to look at some docs. So that's the first question here. And I just want to run down the list in case we don't get to all of these. If anybody's still interested, these are the ones that we'll be trying to get through today, but we may just save the end here for the next event. So the next one, there was a question about how to calculate the totals for a specific column. So say you got a table of data and you want to put a row at the bottom that shows the totals for a price or whatever it is. There was someone asked this over the weekend, and we got a really helpful response from a community member before the Appsmith team could even respond. And I think it completely solved the issue. There's no reason to give a different answer there, but there's some other versions of the question I want to address. Like, what if you don't want to calculate total, you want average, or what if you want to do every column instead of just one? So we're going to look at another approach for that. Then there was a question in Discord here about displaying a countdown. Like, how would you display the difference between the current time and some start time, and then show that refresh on the screen? So we're going to see if we can set that up today as well. And the last one here is a ChatGTP-like interface. So if you wanted to build an app that had a chat interface where you can type in, hit send, and then you see the two different sided conversation that's formatted different. So there's a lot of ways to do that. You could use a table or a list widget, but we're going to look at how to do it with a custom widget today so that you have more control over the formatting and styling and make it really look like that ChatGTP interface. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the first question here about prepared statements. So again, this was a question that came in over the weekend, and I think that I've found what the issue is, but haven't actually tested it yet. Just wanted to cover this in case anybody else comes across this. So there was a user that asked about prepared statements, and without it turned on, they get one format in the date here. And then with prepared statements turned on, with the exact same query, same inputs, it's saving that date differently. So what is going on here? I actually found a similar issue in the forums. This is an open issue, and it's about prepared statements, but it has to do with an integer. And I believe this is the exact same cause here. The fix in this case was to use what's called typecasting. So you have a double colon, that's the cast operator, and then whatever data type that you want to use to save this back to the database. So let's check out the docs here. And I'm assuming Postgres. I don't know what data source this user was using, but this is how you would use typecasting in Postgres. So there is the cast function that you can wrap around something and say, cast this value as whatever type. But a shorter way to write that is just to use the cast double colon expression and then the type after that. So if you have a specific value and you're saving it back to a field that's a date or an integer or some other specific data type besides a string, and there's different ways it could be interpreted, like a number could be a string or a number, a date could actually be a string. So when you're saving it back to a specific field, Postgres and other data sources, what they try to do is called implicit typecasting. It knows that you're saving data to a specific field and it's a certain data type. And so it's like, if you're sending it a string, it's like, okay, that looks like a date. Let's go ahead and save it as a date, but that's implicit. If, however, you want to be explicit about it, you just have to add that cast function around it or say what the type is afterwards. So with the setting on, I think what we're seeing is that it's handling that for you. And then when you turn it off, now it's just going to take it as is. So you're going to see a similar issue with any database that does have those specific field types and you're passing it a string. And prepared statements is just making that easier for you. But if you turn that off, I think you're going to have to explicitly say what that data type is. So if anyone comes across this or you have other questions, I totally understand it's a little confusing, but it's more of an issue with the databases and the way that they work in typecasting. Maybe our UI, we can do a little bit more to help explain it. But I totally understand why this was tough to figure out here. And I think he was asking for help from the Friday Tech Workshop. Right here, it's I think maybe he spelled it backwards, or it could be a keyboard set to left to right, right to left. But this is the Appsmith Friday Tech Workshop. And if you need help from us, you can post your question and tag it with hashtag Appsmith FTW for Friday Tech Workshop. So I think maybe that's what he meant here. He just got it backwards. So with that out of the way, let's check out the next issue here. So how do you calculate the total from a specific column? And let's see, where was the original question here? Calculate values of the rows in a table and show a mathematical result. So basically go through all of the rows, and then we got a little more info here. He was asking about a total, and then out of nowhere, Etheric42 here, he's got this awesome post that goes really in depth about a couple different approaches here. There's a few things about this I want to call out because it's done really well. Using reduce here, this lets you start with an initial value, which is the second parameter, and then you're going to run a function on it. And so it's taking the sum and then passing in each item and then just accumulating a value so that this one line sets the total quantity using reduce. You could do the same thing and then like declare something first and then map over your data and start accumulating the totals that way, and then a third line to go read that final value. Reduce does in one line what that it would take at least three. So that's one thing I really like about this. The other approach here that is nice is the way that he is mutating the data back in the array. So export default, define an array. It's empty at first, and then go reduce the data to a total and set this data back to that array. Now, you could use push, but that's going to temporarily mutate it, and you won't actually see the change get saved. You have to reassign it. So this is similar to pushing a new element to the end of the array, but by using the spread operator here, the three dots, and then referencing the array, you put that inside of a new array, because when you spread the items in an array, you're going to lose the container, the brackets, right? It's just the elements. So you put this in your own new container, a new array, spread the data, and then add the one at the end. You could also use concat or whatever, but this is a nice clean format. So thanks again for the help in the forums here. You're always helping out. We really appreciate you. This is solved for this user. The user said it worked perfect for him, and there was nothing left that we needed to do. However, there's other cases here, other approaches. And so I want to pull this up and look at building a table summary row. So here we have a table of data with lots of different data types. There's the unique ID. There's a Boolean. There's a number that's not unique. So I've got a couple repeats, and it's also, a decimal. So if you've got to add it or averages or whatever, then we've got a list, a fixed list of values. So it's, either A, B, or C, and then just the row index. And let's say you wanted to add the total at the bottom here. So what this is doing is counting the trues. So it's treating each data type differently, okay? If this is a Boolean, it's counting the occurrence of trues. If it is a number, it's just totaling it. If it's a list, it's giving me a count of the unique values of each one. So there's 3 A's, 3 B's, and then for C's, there are 4 of them. And lastly, here at the row index, it's just totaling. I've got the same setup to do averages. And you can see with Boolean, it's giving me a 0.5 because half of these are true, half are false. Average here with a list, I went with whatever one had the most, and it was 3, 3, and 4 for C. So this is a function that I've written that will let you pass some data and tell it what type of calculation do you want to do with this data. If I want all the unique values, there are 2 true and false, or there's 10 numbers here. So let's check this out in the editor. And this is a template actually on the community portal. If you're interested, it's from a video we did last year, 10 tricks, and the app is out there if you want to copy this. Just wanted to raise it for some more visibility because the question came up again. So let's check out the JS here. That's the sample data. Okay, So there is a calc type that I'm passing in. The user clicks a button that they want a total, an average, whatever it is. There's a data set, and then which field is the ID for this data set, because that's going to be unique, and it doesn't make sense to do the average of an ID or the total of maybe if it's a integer and it's like just a incremental. You might want to total those, but chances are you're not going to do anything with that column. And what I'm doing there is using the ID column as a placeholder to put the value, the calc type, because we're not going to calculate this one. And so it tells me this is a row of unique values or totals or whatever. Okay, so the first part of this is that for the first record in the data set, I want to get the keys, the property names. And then for each one of those, I'm looping over the data and setting a property in this summary row. So it goes through them, and then the way that we want to approach it, the way that it gets totaled, I'm using some people hate nested ternary operators. I'm using one here because it's nice and clean to say, here's the type of calc, rather, this is the data type, sorry. So given the column that we're on as we're mapping, okay, if I encounter a number and the calc type is this, unique, then do this. If I encounter a string and it's they want the total, then do this, So this function takes those two inputs, what type of calc do you want to do and which field is that is your ID, and then it maps over the data and returns whatever you need. And this is using a lot of Lodash to make it nice and clean. If I want the unique values, it's just _.unique and give it some values, and then it length tells me how many are there. Min and max are really easy. Count by is pretty obvious. The one that's a little weird here is average. This is using Lodash head, and that's taking the results of these and just creating a different format that chains them together so it's shorter. It might be a little more obvious what was going on if it was written differently, but the point is to make this easy to copy and paste and just change a couple inputs and then add that total row to your table. So don't let the complexity of the code scare you. It's written in a way that you can just copy, paste, and then change a couple inputs. And you can put this as the last row of a table, or you could concatenate it at the beginning, or it can just be a standalone row. So like what I've done here is I'm displaying those totals or unique values or min, whatever it is. This is a small table. It's just one header and one row, rather than having it in the same data set. So that's totally up to you. But I think that answers that one. So let's check out. Actually, give me a second. Let's see. We got any questions in the chat yet? I see hello from Belgium. All right. And if anyone else is watching, feel free to mention in the chat where you're joining from. So next question that we have, that was calculating the totals. So now we're going to look at displaying a duration from a certain time to now. And so like one of those is fixed and the other one's kind of rolling. Let's see. I actually wanted to pull up the app, not the question. I think I got the wrong link there. All right. Here we go. So I already built this. It's really pretty simple, and I want to start over. What we're going to do is add a date picker. So I'll add a new widget, date. And then we want somewhere to display the difference between the date that's been picked, which could be in the future, and now. So let's add a widget, a text widget here to display that difference. Okay. So first, going to put a function in here using moment. So the moment library will take in a string and create an actual date out of it. And we're going to reference the date from this date picker. So if we go to datepicker1.selectedDate and we use the moment function on that, it's going to give us an actual date object, whereas this one is just a string. So that's step one. Now that we have moment, we have an instance of a date object, this gives us a couple extra methods on the end of this here. So after the moment here, I can do .diff. And now diff takes two arguments. What is the date you're comparing? And I think you can leave out the second argument, and it's just assuming seconds or milliseconds. So we want to compare it to today. And to get right now's date, you just use moment without any other parameters. You don't put anything into the function here. So now we have the difference between right now and some date that I've selected here in the future. But it's not very readable. If I want to see this in days or hours, that's the second parameter. So it's a text parameter. And if I say days, now we see I picked something 12 days ahead. Okay, here it's 9. What if we wanted to see it in hours? Okay, what if you want both? So here's how many hours. We can take this number and find the modulus of it with 24. So if I pick something, let's see, where are we at today? If I pick something about a week away, moment. So that's giving me the number of days, and then we find the modulus of that against some number, and then you'll get a remainder. So here we have 167 hours away. I think I wanted days. That's why that didn't look right. So let's say we pick something that's about a week away, but we want to see it in hours, in days and hours. Okay, so first we get it in hours, and we'll want to divide that number by 24. Divide or modulus. Let's try this again. So that comes back as 23. I think that means there's 23 hours after it. Let's see what this does if I change the hour. 1. Yeah. Okay, so there's 1 extra hour. So if we divide that by 24, that's how much is left over. Could also, let's try divide by. So it's 8 something. I think this is what we want. We want to truncate this, or 2 fixed maybe. 2 fixed, 0. So that gives us the exact number of days. And then we could redo this for the remainder and get X hours. I'm not going to go through all the math, but you can use diff and then days and hours and combine a few things and get the individual components there. So that shows you the basics of how to find the difference. But what if you want it to count down? So let's make this a little simpler now. I'm going to get rid of this, and we are just going to look at seconds. So let's look at how many seconds until sometime tomorrow. And now I want this to count down. Okay, so next what we're going to do, we want a function that returns this value here. And then we want to run that function every so often, every second, or however often you want to update that little counter. So I'm going to copy this because we're going to be writing a little more code. We need some more room. First, I'm going to make a function that just returns what I already had. I don't think we need those outer parentheses anymore. And so we just return moment of the date that's selected, and then the difference between that and now in seconds. So that's working. But what if we want to run this every so often and keep seeing it update? So I'm going to use a second function that's async. You could do this in one single function just to keep it separate. We've got a really simple function that returns the value, and then we'll update the timer with an async function. So we have to declare this as async. And then what I want to do is set an interval to run a certain function every so often. Okay, that function is this.getDiff. And the interval, I'm going to do every 1,000 milliseconds or 1 second. And the last piece of this is that we want to see this result, because right now we have a copy of this same code, but it's in a different place, right? So we need to actually reference this function so that that's what's feeding. Right here. Yeah, we're not going to do the math here. We just want to reference the output of that function. So JS object 1. Okay, and you can reference the .data or the function itself. If you do .data, it's just going to show what was ever there the last time it was ran. Whereas getDiff will show you, it's telling it to invoke the function and to keep it updated when the inputs change. Whereas the other one won't actually run the function again for you. So what happens if I change the date here? Yeah, so that's updating with the date change. If I use .data, nothing's telling the function to run again, so it wouldn't change. So that's part of it, is bind it to the function itself to make that reactive like that. The next thing is we need to call the function that is going to run this on an interval. So I'm going to add a button. And we'll just tell this on click. We want to run our JS function that updates the timer. So let's test this out. I pick how many seconds to this date. And then when I click start, okay, it did change once. We set the interval. Let's check out over here. I know. All I did was reference the function here, but I'm not calling it. I think I need to just put a little arrow function here. So let's run that. And now it's going. Okay, so if you want to display a countdown, you can combine that async technique with what we looked at first, how to get the number of days and hours. And it would just take a couple extra lines of code to parse those out and say X number of days plus X hours, seconds. And then this countdown could be updating in real time like that. So I think that covers this one. Let's see, questions. We have, a couple new things in the chat. Responsive gallery. Yeah, we do have a grid widget that's been done in a custom widget. So we can pull that up here in just a few. Let's see, what else do we have? Table on desktop, but switch to a suitable layout. So the table widget, if you're on desktop, yeah, it's definitely, it works great on a desktop, but for a mobile layout, usually you can only get like 3 or 4 columns side by side. So I tend to use a list widget more on mobile because you can stack 3 or 4 things and it's still part of the same element, the same object or item in that list, right? So you could have like their name, address, phone number stacked and then go to the next one. So either a list widget or a custom widget. Custom widgets are a little more advanced. You're going to have to pick a library or some UI approach and make the UI, whereas our other widgets are just, they're out of the box and they only need data. So list widget probably would be a better option, but do check out the custom widgets. There's some really cool stuff you can do there, which I think ties into our last question here. So we'll look at this, and then if there's time, we may get to that that next one here that we just had in the chat. We can do something with a list and a table and see which one looks better for mobile. So there was a question in Discord about creating a ChatGPT-like interface. And again, this one could also work in a list or a table widget. I've done both, actually, connecting it to the query response from ChatGPT. And it works, but it doesn't look like their interface. So we're going to see how to actually build one that looks like the ChatGPT interface. And I started this using Svelte. So let's check out the custom widget implementation first. Let's see. I think I want to make this narrow here so I can zoom in and still see all of the canvas. Here we go. So this is a single custom widget. There's I do have one other text widget here just to look at a response, but all of this is a custom widget. And let me just show real quick. I hit a rate limit and broke my API yesterday. Yes. All right. So I got a response back here, and this is giving me an array of choices. And then inside of those choices, there's a role, who said what. And this one was the assistant. The assistant, responded. And so I want to take the the messages from the API and be able to have this custom widget take a text input, send it. First, it's got to get out of the custom widget into the rest of Appsmith, and then trigger an event to pass that to the query so that it will run the API. So there's a couple different things going on here. Let's look at the custom widget side first. So we'll edit the source. While you have the custom widget selected here, edit source. Okay, and I am importing a single library here called marked that I'm using for displaying Markdown, because ChatGTP can respond with code and Markdown. That's kind of optional. That's not part of making the chat interface work. It's just for looks. And then over here, I am importing, actually I have marked here twice. I don't need that. I just have a div called my chat container, an input, and then a button to send it. So the UI is really simple as far as the code to create the elements just to begin with. Then we've got a little bit of code here that is kind of a mix of what Appsmith needs and expects to make a custom widget function. And then there's some stuff that's specific to the library, to marked here. So you always have an on ready. To get any kind of custom widget to do something, you'll want to run a function when the rest of Appsmith is ready, and then on model change if you're passing data into the custom widget, and if you want to change that data outside of the custom widget, you want it to react and observe those changes, right? Then that's on model change. And then the last one here is a function to just render this element here, this part of the interface. So I'm going to start with this one. This says that my message list is an element here. So there's this whole div that has all of the back and forth, and that's my message list. At the beginning of invoking this function, I'm just clearing it to start out with, and then remapping over all of the messages, and for each one of them adding a list item. So create an LI tag there, setting the content to the message that came back, and then just an extra touch here. So what I'm doing is trying to parse the message with marked, which will take a string that is marked down and turn it into HTML, like make it look like, display it from the markdown. And so I'll try to parse it if something's coming back that does have that markdown. And then if that fails, the fallback is just the plain text. Then I add a class name for the role, and this allows us to make different formatting here. So one of these is formatted to show that it's the end user, and one's the assistant, right? And so by giving a class name that comes from the role, which will be different in each message, that'll give us something to target it with CSS. And then lastly, just append it. So that is the function that runs to build this interface. When Appsmith is ready, then you want to get that list of messages, get the input from the user, and I'm getting the ID of the send button so that I can put a click event on it. When the user clicks send, okay, now we want to put that message at the beginning of the array. You'll notice that in that example earlier when we were calculating totals, it looked really similar to this, but I think the spread operator was first and then the extra item was put on at the end. And for that use case, that was totally fine. Here, the way that ChatGTP's API, and I think all the big ones that I have chat, they put the most recent message first, which means when you add your message to the array, you should start a new array, put in your message object, and then expand the rest of the remaining messages so that yours is first. Because when you send that off to ChatGTP and it comes back with their message, theirs is going to be on top. Theirs is going to be at the 0 index. And this allows you to always display the 0 index as the most recent message. You don't have to look at the length and then find the index of that length. And it's just a little easier approach. So, okay, then we update the model with the messages. So the user just clicks send. We are inside the custom widget. The rest of Appsmith does not know about it yet. And so now that you have that message and you've added it to this whole array of messages, now we're sending it back to the model to get it out of Appsmith. So now that the rest of Appsmith can see it, I trigger an event called send message. So at this point, I think we'll switch back out here and look outside the custom widget. I have it selected here. It's still part of the custom widget properties, but it is outside of the custom widgets 3, HTML, CSS, JavaScript code. So here, there's a couple events. This one is by default, just as an example. The show alert is there. What I added, so I'm going to add a new event just so you see how this happens. First, you just give it a name when you add an event. There are no other settings. You're just creating a menu item here that will have an edit and delete in the button here, right? So new event. And now that you've added a new event, for this event, you can add actions to it. It could be multiple, it could be just running a function, whatever it is. But when something happens inside the custom widget and you want to trigger something outside of it in the rest of Appsmith, you go create an event, give it a name, and then tell the custom widget to trigger that event. So back here, I created an event called send message that runs a JS object function called send message. So if we check out the JS object here, pretty simple. It just updates my array of messages. So I'm storing this in a couple places. The custom widget has its own version of custom1.model.messages, and that is not going to stay in sync automatically with this one. But this is my starting place where I've got original, like just an empty array. The model updates it, and then I'm updating this one so that when I go to run send messages, it's sending that full set. You got to await that response before you go on to the next step here. And so this is taking that 0 index, like I was just saying. It's going to come back as the most recent one. And so if it was last, you'd have to figure out the length and then put the length here. But this is a lot easier. So for that most recent message, I'm putting it at the beginning of the array and then expanding the rest of the messages and setting this equal to that, which then is referenced here. And so it's reactive, and that comes back, and every time this changes, now the custom widget sees a change, and on model change, this is the last one we didn't look at yet. So this one's easy. It just has to re-render it. Now that it's built and it has data, we're just saying to render it, which is this function. There's other cases with custom widgets where you have to use like a init function, depending on if you're like using React or another library where you have to initialize it, but then you don't want to reset the entire widget every time data changes. So it depends on what library you're using. In this case, I kept it really simple. It's basically some vanilla HTML and JSS and whatnot, other than this marked library. And then I did an example of this with Svelte. I thought it was this one here, but I've got that somewhere else. It's basically the same thing, but a different UI approach. So let's see. These are CSS. I did not look at this yet. User. So if there is something with the ID of messages and then a child of that, that's a LI with a user class or a system class, this is the part that lets you make these two look different. So again, back here to the code, we look at the role and then set that role as a class name. So we have added an LI, and then we say that the class name is whatever the role was. And so that dynamically is putting a role on this element. Let's see if we can look at this. Role. Let's see. Name. Yeah, so the class names that are getting applied right here, class user, you can see that the code is dynamically applying those classes so that we can target them with CSS and make it look like this back and forth chat with the left and right alignment and everything in different colors. So I think that covers that question. Let's look at, give me just a second here, and I'm going to check on all of our comments here. We had a question about the table widget in mobile and a date picker. Let's see, to limit the calendar to select only certain dates. Oh, yeah. So let's look at the date one real quick, because the other one, I think a custom widget is a better approach. For mobile, I would say list widget's the easy answer. Custom widget's going to be more flexible. Table, yeah, it doesn't work so well with more than 3 or 4 columns on mobile. So I think what I'll do is come up with a in-depth custom widget for that I can post as a better answer, instead of trying to throw something together with the 20 minutes that we have left today. So instead, we're going to look at this date picker and how to limit, dynamically limit the range. All right, going to add a new date picker. And let's say this is a sign up for something, and you only want to allow people to sign up within the next week. They can pick a future date, but we don't want to allow them to pick anything beyond 1 week from now. So what we're going to do is, first, I don't want time for this case. We're just going to use a date. We have properties here for the date format itself, and also the default value. You don't necessarily need to have a default in here. It could be blank. Oops, there we go. And precision, none. So now we want to set this min and max date. We could just make the min today. That's pretty easy. So I'm going to set this to JS, and we'll just use moment. And this is going to give it to a specific time, but I just want it to the date. But let's see what this does. So, it's already working. So I can't pick yesterday. I can pick today. And since I didn't use time, actually that's it. That works. That's all I needed. If I showed the time, I think it would let me, then part of today would be valid, depending on the hour, basically. So cool. That works for the min date. Now let's set the max date, so I can't go any higher than Friday of next week. So we'll switch this to JS as well. And we want the max to be another moment. Now, without any parameters, moment creates a date object of today's date and time, but I want to add something to that and figure out what is 7 days away. So moment has this dot add, which takes 1 parameter or 2. I know the first one's required. Yeah, it looks like it's not adding seconds or anything. So the second parameter is required. You have to tell it what units you want to add. 23. Okay. So it's adding 7 days. And if you put hours or minutes or seconds or whatever, you can add different units. You can also use a negative number. I don't think there is a subtract. Okay. So you can use add to subtract with a negative number, or you can use subtract. I've always used add and then put a negative number there. So let's see, did that work? Yes, I can pick up to next Friday. And then if I come to this tomorrow, it should unlock the 24th, and that'll just be this rolling window based on the current date. So I think that answers that one. Is there anything else we can do quickly here? Can we do the same for hours? A range of dates using the date picker. A single date picker cannot select a range of dates. No. You have to use 2 different date pickers, or you could build a custom widget. That could be a cool widget to pick the start and end and see it highlight. Actually, I like that idea. I think I'm going to try to find a library that will let us do that, and maybe do that for the next live coding. So our date picker, you would have to use 2 different ones, and then take the selected date from those 2 and create that date range. But yeah, that's a really cool idea. It's a real common UI, especially like booking a trip, like flight start and end dates, and you pick the first one and it shows the whole highlight. So I'm going to find a library. If anybody knows of one, put that in the chat, but I'll see what I can find, and then we're going to make a custom widget that does that. So, all right, let's see. Is there any other quick, easy ones we can do? I think we might wrap this up here pretty soon. There is the responsive gallery. I think that one's built. Give me just a second to see if I can find this custom widget. And I might be able to show one more here before we go. Yeah, this will work. Okay, so we do not have a grid widget, but we have custom widgets now, which lets you build just about anything. And so this one, let's check it out in the editor. Oh yeah, I've got it set to mobile again. So this custom widget, it's just taking in some data that's been flattened here because it's nested. Won't go too much into that. Basically, I'm feeding in an array of data, and the only thing going into this is a user array. There's no HTML, there's no functionality for what these buttons do or whatever. It's just the data. And then all of the code for the custom widget is inside this edit source. So let's check that out. And there is a div, which is the wrapper, and that's it for the HTML side. Then on the CSS for that wrapper, I've set its display to grid and then given it fractions. I want it to have 3 equal fractions. So it's fixed at a grid of 3 that resizes based on the area or whatever, how much room it has. And then I've got some media queries here that says, if the min width gets to 600, well, now we can do 4. And if the min width gets to 900 pixels, now we have room for 5 columns. So it's reactive by resizing a little bit until there's enough room, and then it creates a whole new column or it removes a column, but it also resizes a little bit in between those. So it's mostly done in CSS. There's very little code here involved in creating the grid. It's the code creates a single card and then an array of those. So now we'll look at the JavaScript here. All right, which one do I want to start with? So there's the main function that says, here's my container. I've got some users coming in from the Appsmith model. The headers for it is coming from the object keys of the first user. And then I want to convert all of the users to this card object. And so the card divs is I'm going to take the headers and map over them. For each header, the value coming from the row that I'm on is the object of this row, and it's go to its header. And then let's see, what am I doing here to see if it's a URL? If the field matches this, then I want to return an image tag with that value as the source. Otherwise, return a div with that value in it. So in any data that I pass in, I'm displaying it as text, even if it's a array or object or whatever it is. In the one case where the value matches a URL that ends in image type, I turn it into an image tag. Then join all of those strings. And lastly, return the string wrapped in this other div. So in here, there's a single div. And then here I'm wrapping it in one more. I think that was just for some styling stuff. I made this a while ago. Don't exactly remember. And then I map over that card array, set the result to the inner HTML here to save it back, and then update this update grid thing here. So this basically resizes it for the data that was fed in. And the last piece of this is once Appsmith is ready to execute all this stuff. So figure out what container I want to apply this to. I got an event listener for when the window is resized, and then I call this function to keep redrawing the grid when the parent window is resized. So it's listening for Appsmith, the user to resize the window, and then this function regenerates, it'll redraw the grid. So All right, we are about out of time. Some great questions today, everyone. Appreciate everyone showing up. There's a few here that we weren't able to get to, so I'll be focusing on those for our next Q&A session. Thanks again. And if you do have any questions that you'd like to submit, just want to remind everyone there's lots of ways to do this. You can send your question as text, email, or whatever ahead of time, or as a video. If you want us to play it, you can record your question and we'll air it. And then answer it on the show live, or you can join the live stream. So if you're interested in that, I'll actually have to send you a separate invite link. So reach out on Discord, DM me, and I can send you an invite to join the live stream and demo your, ask your question, or it could be for the community show and tell. We're going to do those as well, and it's the same thing. Either send it in ahead of time, send me a link to the app, or join the stream and demo it yourself. So lots of options. And every Friday, we're going to have some type of event like this, but you'll have to show up to see what it is. Today, I didn't have too many questions till right up before the event. And then suddenly I had several to fill the hour. Backup plan was to do some live coding. So you never know what's going to happen, but it will be something every Friday, some kind of workshop. So thanks again, everyone. Looking forward to doing more of these. We've got an awesome one planned for next week. And the team will be actually meeting up in India. So it's a really big event for next week. It won't be live. This one's been pre-recorded, but I will be keeping an eye on the chat and trying to answer any questions there. So that is it for this week. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.